Welcome, everyone, to our little study group for PP 5340 Introduction to Public Policy and Management.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're diving into something really interesting. The Connecticut Digital Equity Plan. It's called Everyone Connected. And we should definitely give credit where it's due. The key folks behind this are Doug Casey, the executive director, Lauren Thompson, who's the digital equity program manager at the Connecticut Commission for Educational Technology, and also Sarah Elaminich, a research fellow from the governor's office.
Yeah, it's a really solid piece of work, and what I find fascinating about it is how it shifts the conversation. You know, it moves away from just talking about tech, the easy part maybe,
Right.
and really forces us to look at the trickier side, the human side, the economic hurdles. We're basically looking at how a state that's, really advanced, technologically wealthy, how does it deal with the fact that not everyone's benefiting equally? It's a real study in contrasts.
That is exactly it. So our mission today for this deep dive is pretty clear. We want to break down how Connecticut measured where things stand right now with digital equity.
Like baseline, yeah.
Exactly, the baseline. Then we need to really zoom in on the specific roadblocks. You mentioned seniors, but also folks coming out of incarceration, people who face language barriers, all these different groups.
Yeah.
And finally, we'll look at the solutions they're putting on the table. Are they ambitious enough? Are they practical?
And we have to start with that core paradox you mentioned, the one the report hits right away. Connecticut is number 7 in the whole country for internet connectivity. The infrastructure, the physical wires, and fiber, they're great.
Amazing.
Yeah. But there's still this huge digital divide. And that tells you something crucial immediately. This isn't primarily a problem you solve by just, digging trenches and laying more cable.
Yeah.
It's about adoption. It's about cost. It's about whether people know how to use the tech and whether they feel comfortable and safe doing it.
That distinction just blows my mind sometimes. I mean, if, 99% of eligible homes can physically get high-speed internet?
Right.
Why on earth do you need a massive plan like this? It totally flips the script on the policy problem. We're not talking about engineers anymore.
No, not really.
We're talking sociology, economics, teaching, almost pedagogy.
Exactly. Because look, if the barrier is that the monthly bill is just too high, or someone's terrified they'll get scammed online, or they just literally don't know how to turn on a computer and get to a website, spending millions more on fiber optic cables isn't going to help that person get online. So this plan, fundamentally, it's an intervention. It's designed to tackle those non-physical barriers that keep people disconnected, even when the internet is technically right there just outside their house.
Okay, so let's dig into how they built this plan, because the research behind it looks incredibly thorough. That really gives the policy recommendations some weight.
It does. This wasn't just, a weekend project. The digital equity team spent a good chunk of 2022 and 2023 doing really extensive original research. And they didn't do it in a vacuum. They worked closely with academic partners, specifically the UConn School of Public Policy.
That partnership says a lot, doesn't it, about the rigor?
Yeah, absolutely. It signals they weren't just like pulling old census data off a shelf or making educated guesses. They used a really smart blended approach. They got the big picture, the quantitative stuff, but also the deep qualitative insights. You need both for good policy.
So let's talk about those methods. The big one seems to be the resident survey.
Yeah, that was the cornerstone.
A large convenience sample, you said. Over 6,000 responses, 6,275 to be exact.
Right. And they were smart about how they got those responses. They knew if they just put an online survey out there, they'd mostly hear from people who were already online.
A usual suspect.
Exactly. So they went out of their way to distribute it through other channels in English and Spanish.
Like where?
Well, they used every community touch point they could think of. The state library system, obviously crucial, but also huge players like AARP, the Department of Social Services, DSS, places that connect with large numbers of residents, including those who might be offline.
And I saw they even partnered with CT Food Share at mobile food banks. That's clever.
Isn't it? That's how you reach people in those covered households, folks under 150% of the federal poverty line, people who might just be invisible if you only used online methods. They actively try to fight that self-selection bias you often see in these kinds of studies.
Okay, so that gives them the numbers, the scale, but you mentioned qualitative insights too.
Yeah, and that's where you really get the why. They held 6 focus groups, specifically targeted to members of those 7 main covered populations we'll talk about.
And community conversations too.
Right, with frontline workers, think about it, librarians, social workers, case managers. The people who see these struggles every single day. They can explain the reasons behind the statistics in a way numbers alone just can't.
Makes sense.
Plus, they did partner surveys, and a big municipal survey got responses from over 2,100 residents like 152 out of 169 towns. So they got really local data, too, on things like service reliability in specific areas or lack of provider choice.
Wow, that is comprehensive. And all this data, this mix of numbers and stories, allowed them to boil it down to four main themes, four core barriers.
Exactly. And these aren't just random buckets they came up with. They really emerged from what people were saying inductively. And they also line up deductively with what we already know from digital divide research.
Okay, let's unpack these four pillars. They seem to be the foundation for all the solutions later on. First up, the big one, economic barriers.
The most obvious, yeah. This is fundamental. It's about whether a household can afford it, pure and simple. The cost of the internet service itself, the cost of a decent computer or tablet, and navigating all those subsidy programs, figuring out if you even qualify, how to apply. It can be a maze.
And it's not just about being below the poverty line, right?
No, that's a key point. The economic pressure hits working class and even some middle class families too. It's not just the monthly internet bill. It's affording a reliable device, keeping software updated. Those costs add up.
Okay, pillar number 2, knowledge.
Right, and this is way more than just knowing how to use a mouse or type. We're talking about the skills you need for everyday life now.
Like what?
Like navigating complicated government websites to apply for benefits, knowing how to install software updates safely, spotting phishing scams. And critically, knowing where to turn for tech support when things go wrong, support that's patient, affordable, and maybe even speaks your language.
Gotcha. Third pillar, perceptions. This sounds more psychological.
It is. It's about the attitudes and beliefs people hold. The data really showed a lot of fear holding people back.
Fear of what?
Fear of identity theft, getting scammed online, even just anxiety about breaking an expensive device.
Yeah.
But it also includes just not seeing the benefit. Maybe a lack of awareness of what technology can actually do for them, or even a sense of pride, like I've lived my whole life without it, I'm fine. It's an attitude barrier.
Okay, and the final one, number 4, infrastructure. Even though Connecticut ranks high.
Yeah, even with that high ranking, it's not perfect everywhere. So this barrier covers those pockets where a service is still unavailable or unreliable, maybe in really rural spots. Remoteness is a factor, and, crucially, lack of competition among providers. Because less competition usually means higher prices.
Which loops right back to the economic barrier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You absolutely have to see these four things as interconnected.
Yeah.
You can't just teach digital skills, the knowledge part, if someone is terrified to click anything, the perceptions part.
Right.
And you can't really overcome that fear if the cost is just way too high, the economic part. So any effective policy has to hit all four of these at the same time. It's a package deal.
Okay, before we dive deeper into all the problems, let's acknowledge the strengths. The report makes it clear Connecticut isn't starting from scratch here. They have some real assets already in place.
That's super important context. You got to measure the effort needed against what's already there. And like we said, the physical infrastructure, it's strong, really strong. Less than 1%, think about that, less than 1% of eligible locations lack access to the standard federal benchmark, that 100 down, 20 up speed. That's top tier.
And it's even better in many places, right, with fiber.
Yeah, over 60% of locations can get fiber to the premise, FTP. That means gigabit speeds, symmetrical, same speed up and down. So, yeah, the vast majority of the state can get really excellent internet service, which kind of proves the point that the real policy challenge is on the adoption side.
So if the physical network is so good, why haven't the internet companies just, signed everyone up? Why the gap?
Well, that's where you get into market dynamics and maybe market failure and the regulatory picture. Providers naturally focus on areas where it's easiest and most profitable to connect people, dense areas, higher income areas.
Makes sense from their perspective.
Right. But investing heavily in outreach programs to sign up, say, low-income folks who might need a lot of tech support and might be hesitant, that's maybe less attractive financially. And that's exactly where government and community assets have to step in.
Which brings us to the state's asset inventory in the report, section 3.1.1, I think. It highlights these crucial nonprofit support systems, like public libraries.
Oh, libraries are absolute heroes in this story. Unsung heroes, maybe. Connecticut has 190 public libraries, plus 5 bookmobiles.
And they're doing way more than just lending books these days.
Oh, absolutely. They are critical digital community hubs. They offer free computer skills classes. They lend out devices like hotspots or Chromebooks. They have free Wi-Fi people can use even from the parking lot after hours. And this is really key. Many are running these things called digital navigator pilot programs.
Okay, tell us more about that role. What exactly does a digital navigator do?
Think of them as a personal guide, an empathetic guide, through the whole digital maze. They don't just hand you a flyer, they'll actually sit down with you, one-on-one.
And help with?
Everything. Figuring out if you qualify for affordability programs like the ACP, helping you choose a low-cost internet plan or device that fits your needs, troubleshooting basic problems when your computer freezes, and just building that confidence, helping you feel safer online. They tackle that knowledge barrier and that perception barrier directly, personally.
That sounds incredibly valuable. And then there's the adult education system, too, serving a lot of people.
Huge numbers. Over 22,000 residents just in the last fiscal year through 53 different agencies. And they're specifically connecting digital literacy to real-life goals.
Like jobs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Job readiness, being able to use telehealth portals for doctor's appointments, even just participating in civic life, like registering to vote online. They make the benefits of technology really tangible, really relevant to people's lives.
Okay, so strong community support. What about on the state level, policy-wise?
They've been pretty proactive there, too. They passed a law, Public Act 21-159, to create really good standardized maps showing exactly where broadband is and isn't available. That detailed mapping is crucial.
Why?
Because it tells them exactly where that last 1% connectivity gap is, and that feeds directly into their 5-year broadband action plan.
The strategic roadmap.
Right, and that plan is essential for grabbing federal funding. Connecticut managed to secure over $144 million from the big federal program, BEAD Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment.
So even though 99% are covered, that money is for...
It's mostly earmarked for connecting those final, hardest-to-reach locations, that last 1%, and also for strengthening what's called middle-mile infrastructure, basically. The connections between the main internet backbone and local networks to make sure the whole system is resilient and ready for future needs across the entire state.
Okay, now we need to talk affordability again, because this connects to a major federal program, the Affordable Connectivity Program, the ACP. That's been huge, right?
Absolutely foundational for a lot of the progress they've made recently. By early 2023, something like 5% of all households in Connecticut were getting help through ACP. That's a significant chunk of the eligible folks. The program gave them, what, a $30 or sometimes $75 monthly discount?
Yeah.
It made a huge difference in making internet affordable.
And it wasn't just the monthly bill, right? Devices, too.
Yes, that's a really important part. The ACP also helped provide low-cost devices. Over 25,000 computers were delivered to households in need in Connecticut through that initiative. That's almost $2.5 million in savings for those families, getting them a crucial tool, really tangible impact.
Oh, there's a huge but coming, isn't there? The report flags this pretty urgently.
Yes, this is the critical warning sign flashing red in the middle of the plan. The ACP program is running out of federal funding. Fast. It was projected to be completely out of money by mid-2024. We can't gloss over how serious this is.
So if Congress doesn't renew the funding, what happens?
Chaos, basically. You've got those 25,000 plus households potentially losing the device subsidy and tens of thousands more losing that $30 a month lifeline that makes their internet bill manageable. Suddenly, the affordability problem goes from being sort of managed, partially contained, to being this massive statewide crisis almost overnight. It completely changes the math for reaching the goals in this equity plan.
Wow.
The loss of ACP means the state's own resources, those libraries, the adult ed centers, the digital navigators, their workload is going to explode. It makes everything else in this Connecticut plan even more urgent because they'll have to figure out state-level ways to fill a giant hole left by the federal government potentially dropping the ball.
Okay, so with that potential ACP crisis looming, who are the people most likely to be hit hardest? And who are already facing the biggest barriers now? The plan identifies these 8 main groups, the covered populations.
Right, and it's important to remember these groups often overlap, right? Someone could be an aging resident and have a disability and live in a low-income household. That just compounds the challenges.
So who are they?
Okay, the list includes aging residents, defined as 60 and older, residents with disabilities, residents in covered households, that's the income measure, under 150% of the federal poverty level, residents with language barriers, racial and ethnic minority groups, specifically Black, African American, and Hispanic Latino residents who face disproportionate gaps, rural residents, veterans, and finally, residents currently incarcerated.
That's a broad range. And to figure out the specific needs across these diverse groups, the team measured things across 6 different aspects of digital equity, not just do you have internet.
Exactly. They understood that true digital equity is more complicated than just having a connection. It's multifaceted. So the 6 components they measured are 1, affordability and access to high-speed internet, 2, affordability and access to devices, you need the tool, not just the pipe. 3, affordability and accessibility of tech support. Can you get help when you need it? 4, accessibility and inclusivity of public resources. Can you actually use essential online services? 5 is digital literacy, the skills piece. And number 6 is security and privacy use and awareness, the confidence and safety piece.
Why break out things like security, privacy, and tech support separately? Couldn't you just lump that under digital literacy?
It's a really good question, but I think they were smart to separate them. They address different failure points in the chain. Digital literacy is kind of proactive. Can I learn how to use this software? Security awareness is more preventative. Should I trust this email link?
Okay.
And accessible tech support, number 3, that's about what happens when things go wrong. It's remedial. If my tablet crashes, can I find help that's affordable, patient, maybe understands my disability needs, or speaks Spanish? Real equity means you need to succeed at all 6 of these steps. One weak link breaks the chain.
Makes sense. And the report kind of rolls all this up into one main benchmark, the digital connection benchmark.
Yes, that's their ultimate yardstick. And it's defined pretty clearly. A resident needs to have 3 things to meet the benchmark. 1, broadband access at home. 2, a working computer, laptop, or desktop. And 3, a smartphone.
Why all 3?
Because that reflects how we actually live and work now, right?
Well,
You often need a proper computer for complex stuff like writing a resume, doing detailed schoolwork, maybe filling out long online forms. But you also need the smartphone for things on the go, for two-factor authentication, quick messages, mobile apps. You really need both tools plus the connection.
okay, so how does Connecticut stack up against this benchmark?
Well, statewide, about 27% of all residents fall below this 3-part standard, which is already significant, more than a quarter.
But for the covered populations?
That's where the numbers become alarming. The gaps just explode. For residents with language barriers, a staggering 51%, more than half, fall below the digital connection benchmark. They lack the basic toolkit for full participation.
51%.
It's a shocking statistic. It points to really deep systemic exclusion. And right behind them, you have residents with disabilities and people in those covered households, low income, both at 49% below the standard.
So nearly half of both those groups, too.
Yeah. That tells you loud and clear that money affordability and physical or learning accessibility are probably the 2 biggest drivers of the digital divide in Connecticut.
What about seniors? Aging residents?
Even there, the gap is significant. 41% of aging residents don't meet that benchmark. Now, some seniors are financially secure, so for that group, it suggests the barrier might be less about the cost and more about those other factors. The knowledge, the comfort level, the fear of scams we talked about.
So these numbers give us the what? The scale of the problem, where it's most severe.
Exactly. But now, as policymakers or just people trying to understand this, we need to get to the why. We need to hear the stories, understand the fears, the daily economic pressures that came out in those focus groups. That's where the policy solutions really need to connect. #Chat4FE. Detailed barriers and anecdotes from the front lines.
Right. Let's get into those stories and specific barriers. Starting with affordability, you said it's a massive issue for covered households and minority groups. How does that play out?
Well, the numbers paint a stark picture. People in covered households are almost 3 times more likely to have no internet at all compared to the state average. That's 15% versus 6%. That's a huge difference.
15% with nothing, just completely cut off.
Yeah, and the focus groups really brought that economic despair to life. People talk about not just the high monthly prices, but this feeling of being trapped by a lack of competition. If you only have 1 or maybe 2 providers in your area, they can basically charge whatever they want.
And that keeps low-income families completely out of the market.
Totally. But there was also an anecdote in the report that hinted at something maybe even more concerning than just standard market forces.
What was that?
A participant in one focus group described being charged more for the exact same internet service in their predominantly poor Black neighborhood compared to what people were paying in wealthier, whiter areas nearby.
Seriously. Digital redlining, essentially.
If it's true and widespread, yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. It suggests pricing structures might not just be high, but potentially discriminatory, charging the most vulnerable people more precisely because they have fewer options. That demands a closer look from regulators, for sure.
Wow. Okay. And what about that stuck-in-the-middle group you mentioned? The aging residents.
Right, the affordability crunch hits them differently. Many rely on Social Security. It gives them enough income to live on, but it often puts them just over the strict income limits for programs like ACP or maybe local programs offering cheap computers.
So they make too much to get help, but not enough to comfortably afford the service.
Exactly, they're caught. too rich for aid, but still struggling to pay an $80 or $100 monthly internet bill on a fixed income, let alone shell out hundreds for a new laptop when the old one dies. Policy needs to address that gap, maybe with sliding scale subsidies or adjusted income thresholds for state-run programs.
Okay, let's shift gears to a really stark barrier. The institutional one faced by people who are incarcerated. You said their baseline score on the digital connection benchmark is basically 0.
While they're inside, yes. For all practical purposes, it's 0. Facility policies often prohibit or severely limit internet access.
And the problem is, what happens when they get out?
It's a massive policy disconnect. They re-enter society, and bam, everything requires digital skills. Finding a job, mostly online applications now, getting around. GPS on a smartphone, dealing with the DMV, accessing benefits, all moving online. But they've had 0 practice, 0 preparation inside.
And those tablets they sometimes get in prison, the report wasn't very positive about them?
No. The focus group quotes were pretty telling. Participants called them very, very limited. One person said it's basically a glorified phone and a TV. They're fine for maybe entertainment or limited messaging, but they do not equip people with the skills needed to navigate the real-world internet, handle complex software, or do a proper online job search.
So they face this immediate re-entry shock.
Instantaneous.
Yeah.
And overwhelming. We heard quotes about just getting lost online. You click there, it sends you somewhere else, gives you an ad, right? And then you're like, wait, I just clicked this, now I'm buying Clorox bleach. Just the sheer complexity and, frankly, the predatory nature of parts of the internet. The ads, the pop-ups, the confusing layouts. It's a massive hurdle if you haven't used a real computer or the open internet in years. This really screams for digital literacy training before release.
Okay, moving to accessibility and skills. The challenges for residents with disabilities and those with language barriers seem particularly tough.
They require really specific, tailored approaches. For people with disabilities, especially visual or maybe mobility impairments, the technology itself can feel inaccessible, and that breeds this real fear and avoidance.
There is that quote.
Yeah, the powerful quote from the focus group participant with a visual impairment. I don't want to get involved. I just don't want to risk it. And all I'm trying to do is get a recipe for chicken noodle bake or something.
That just breaks your heart. It shows how this divide stops people from doing even simple, enjoyable things online, not just essential tasks. They're afraid of making a mistake, clicking the wrong thing, messing up their security.
Exactly. And their needs are often very concrete. Things like specialized software, JAWS for screen reading, Zoom text for magnifying text. But it's also about the design of the online world.
Sure.
The report slams poorly designed websites, bad color contrast, images covering text, no descriptions for images. These aren't just annoyances. They are active barriers excluding people with disabilities from public information and services.
And for people facing language barriers, you said it was a triple threat.
Right. That quote captured it perfectly. One is the language, knowledge of what we're trying to learn, and then how it's taught. It's not enough to just translate a user manual into Spanish or another language.
Why not?
Because you also have to bridge the potential knowledge gap. Maybe someone isn't familiar with basic computer concepts at all. And how it's taught needs to be culturally sensitive and appropriate. It's language, plus baseline knowledge, plus pedagogy all at once.
And the numbers back that up.
Absolutely. A shocking 76% of residents with language barriers fall below the digital literacy benchmark. That's the highest failure rate of any group. It's a clear mandate for investing in multilingual, culturally competent digital skills programs.
Okay, last barrier area. Digital security concerns. This seems to hit confidence hard.
It really does. While most people statewide, about 73%, feel somewhat familiar with security practices, that fear of scams and identity theft is a major deterrent, especially for the most vulnerable.
Like seniors and people with disabilities again.
Exactly. They score lowest on the security benchmark. 62% of aging residents are below it, 68% of those with disabilities. And it makes sense, they're often disproportionately targeted by online scams.
And getting help is hard.
That seems to be a big part of it. Especially for older adults, the report found they often avoid formal tech support. They find technicians may be insensitive, impatient, or just unable to explain things clearly, so they rely on family.
Who might be too busy or not really know the answers either.
Right. And the result? Device paralysis. That anecdote about the iPad at home that somebody just got me for Christmas, that's just still sitting there unused. It's not being used because the person is afraid to connect it, maybe afraid they'll break it, or they can't figure out how to get the accessibility features working. It shows that just giving someone a device isn't enough. You need that patient, tailored support alongside it. So, given this really deep understanding of the barriers, the plan lays out a path forward. It's structured around 6 main goals. These are meant to guide the state's efforts over 5 years to try and close these gaps.
Okay, let's quickly list those 6 goals. What are they aiming for?
All right, number 1, close the digital skills gaps. 2, make sure the public actually knows about the resources available. 3, ensure there are affordable ways for people to get online. 4, support accessible and inclusive digital government services. 5, continue supporting the build-out of high-speed broadband infrastructure, especially that last mile. And 6, foster ongoing learning, keep up with research and best practices.
Pretty comprehensive. But what's really interesting is how the specific solutions under these goals seem to come directly from the community feedback, right, from those focus groups.
That's critical.
Yeah.
These aren't just ideas hatched in an office somewhere. They reflect what people on the ground actually said they needed, especially when it comes to the economic side.
The call for economic reform sounded really strong.
It was passionate. People in the focus groups basically argued for treating internet like a utility like water or electricity, something essential.
Meaning
they want more consistent, regulated pricing. They want mandated affordability standards. They want to move away from this model where prices vary wildly depending on where you live and who your provider is, often a monopoly.
And they also talked about the income limits for help.
Yes, a really practical suggestion. Raise the income thresholds for subsidies. That directly addresses that stuck-in-the-middle problem for seniors and others who make just a little too much to qualify for ACP but still can't afford the market rates. If ACP funding disappears, a state program needs that flexibility.
Okay, what about devices, the device strategy?
The feedback was clear. People need real tools. Affordable laptops or maybe desktop computers, not just tablets with limited functions. That quote about a Chromebook being pretty much worthless without stable internet really hits home.
Why the emphasis on laptops over tablets?
Because so many essential tasks require a full computer OS. Think about writing a proper resume, filling out complex multi-page government forms online, participating effectively in a video job interview. A tablet just doesn't cut it for a lot of that. The device provided needs to match the task required.
Makes sense. And then the solution that ties into knowledge and perceptions, tailored training.
Probably the most vital piece for adoption. The recommendation is for free, high-quality computer and internet skills training delivered right there in trusted community spots, libraries, adult ed centers, maybe even pre-release programs in correctional facilities.
And tailored is the key word.
Absolutely. It can't be one size fits all. The instructors need to be empathetic, patient. They need training themselves on how to work with diverse learners, someone with anxiety about technology, someone using assistive software due to a disability, someone needing instruction in Spanish. You have to address the fear factor with compassion and understanding.
Okay, so those are the kinds of solutions, but how do they measure success? Are there specific targets? The KPIs?
Yes, and looking at the measurable objectives, the key performance indicators, really underscores how challenging this work is. These are 10-year targets for reducing the percentage of residents who don't meet the benchmarks.
10 years, okay. Give us an example.
Okay, take digital literacy. The group with the biggest challenge is residents with language barriers. 76% are currently below the benchmark. The 10-year goal is to get that down to 70%.
Only a 6 percentage point improvement over a decade. That seems small.
It might sound modest, yeah. But what it tells you is that reaching that remaining group, the people who are most isolated, most resistant, facing the biggest hurdles, is incredibly difficult and resource-intensive. These aren't problems you solve overnight. It takes sustained effort.
Okay, another example. Maybe on security.
Sure. For covered households, low income, the goal is to reduce the percentage scoring below the digital security benchmark from 71% down to 67%. Again, just a 4-point drop. But think what that means, successfully teaching thousands of households how to spot scams, use strong passwords, navigate safely online, overcoming years of potential fear or bad experiences. It's hard work.
And goal 4, about accessible digital government. What's the target there?
That one's focused on decreasing the number of inaccessible government websites and online services, especially at the local level, making sure everything meets a baseline standard for accessibility, the lowest common denominator, as the report puts it.
That sounds like a huge task, too.
It's massive and maybe less visible. State agency websites often have to meet federal ADA standards, but think about all the individual town websites across Connecticut's 169 municipalities. Many probably lag way behind. So this goal involves potentially auditing hundreds of websites, providing training to town staff, maybe even funding for small towns to update their digital front doors. Because if government requires you to interact online for essential things, paying taxes, getting permits, finding voting info, then it absolutely has to ensure those pathways are usable by everyone, regardless of disability or language. Hashtag outro.
So wrapping up this deep dive on Connecticut's Everyone Connected plan, it really paints a complex picture, doesn't it?
It really does. You've got the state with top-tier physical internet infrastructure, a real paradox. But at the same time, these deep, persistent gaps driven by things that aren't physical at all.
Right. The sources make it so clear that closing the digital divide now, it's not really about the cables anymore. It's about tackling those four big interconnected themes we kept coming back to. It's exactly.
Yeah.
The economic pressures, especially on low-income folks and the working class, the knowledge gaps, the actual skills people need, the perceptions, the fear, the lack of confidence, the mistrust, and, yeah, still addressing those lingering infrastructure weak spots in certain areas.
And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is how this massive shift to a digital-first world, especially accelerated by things like COVID, it really wasn't a choice for many people. It was kind of forced upon them, and it left a lot of folks behind without the support, the skills, or even just the time they needed to adapt.
Which leads us to that final, really provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. If things we now consider absolutely essential for just getting, by funding a job, accessing government benefits, managing your health, if those things are increasingly only available online, how long can we, as a society or as a state, keep thinking of willingness to adopt technology as purely a personal choice? If not adopting means you're shut out of basic economic and civic life, doesn't that create an urgent responsibility for the state to actively facilitate participation for everyone?
Okay.
What's the real cost down the road of not closing these gaps, the drag on the economy, the strain on social services, the loss of civic connection, especially if even these modest 10-year goals in the plan aren't met?
That's a powerful question to end with. It really frames digital equity not just as a nice-to-have social goal, but as a fundamental economic necessity.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive today. We really hope this encourages you to keep exploring the policies and strategies needed to bridge these critical divides.